Hey there, exhausted listener. Yeah, you, the one still scrolling at whatever ungodly hour this is. Tonight, we're taking a little trip back in time, way back, like 20,000 years back, to a place where Netflix didn't exist. Central heating was a distant dream that nobody was having, and your biggest life decision was whether to freeze to death outside or suffocate from smoke inside a cave with 12 other people who haven't bathed in. Well, ever. You think your day was rough? Let me paint you a picture of what rough actually looked like. Imagine waking up every single morning not knowing if you'd eat that day, if a predator would make you its lunch, or if your toes were still attached to your feet after sleeping on frozen ground. Spoiler alert, comfort wasn't invented yet. Neither was privacy, or toilet paper, or basic human decency when it came to personal space. So here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna turn off that light yes, that artificial, temperature-controlled, pest-free environment you're in. You're gonna pull that blanket up, sink into that mattress that isn't made of animal hides, crawling with mites, and let yourself drift off while I tell you about a time when survival was a full-time job with no vacation days, no sick leave, and definitely no dental plan. Oh, and before the cold embrace of sleep takes you, because it will, trust me, this story is designed to bore you into blissful unconsciousness. Do me a solid. If this kind of historical torture helps you sleep, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Smash that like button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future suffering. And drop a comment down below telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always nice to know there are other insomniacs out there bonding over prehistoric misery. All right, let's go back, way back, to the Ice Age. You open your eyes. That's your first mistake. The darkness around you is thick, not like the darkness of your bedroom at night, where maybe a little light seeps in from under the door or through the curtains. No, this is absolute suffocating blackness, the kind that makes you question whether you've actually opened your eyes at all. You blink a few times, just to check. Yep, they're open. Not that it matters. You can't see a damn thing. The cold hits you next, and I mean really hits you. It's not the kind of cold where you pull the blanket up a little higher or adjust the thermostat. This is the kind of cold that seeps into your bones, that makes your joints ache before you've even moved, that turns your breath into visible clouds, even though you can't see them in the darkness. Your fingers are numb. Your toes, well, you're not entirely sure you still have toes. You wiggle them experimentally. They respond. Barely. That's good. Probably. You're lying on the ground. Not a bed, not a sleeping bag. The ground. Specifically, you're on a pile of animal hides that seemed like a good idea last night, but have since become stiff with cold and damp with your own condensed breath. Underneath the hides, you can feel every rock, every uneven surface of the cave floor pressing into your body. Your back hurts. Your hips hurt. Your neck is at an angle that would make a chiropractor weep. There's a smell. Oh God, is there a smell? It's a mixture of smoke, unwashed bodies, animal fat, rotting meat from yesterday's meal that someone forgot to throw far enough away from the sleeping area, and something else you can't quite identify, but that makes your stomach turn. You breathe through your mouth. That helps. Slightly. Around you, you can hear breathing. Lots of breathing. Snoring, actually. Heavy, congested snoring from at least a dozen other people packed into this cave with you. Someone to your left is coughing. A wet, rattling cough that's been going on for weeks now. You've stopped wondering if they're going to get better. They're probably not. Someone else is scratching. Always scratching. The lice and fleas are relentless, and there's no escaping them when you're sharing sleeping space with this many warm bodies. You try to sit up. Your muscles protest immediately. Everything is stiff from the cold and from sleeping in essentially the same position all night because movement meant letting cold air under the hides. You push through it, sitting up slowly, and immediately regret it. The air is somehow even colder when you're upright. You pull the hide around your shoulders, but it doesn't help much. The fur is matted and worn, nowhere near as effective as it used to be. Your stomach growls, loudly. When did you last eat? Yesterday morning? The day before? Time is weird when your entire existence revolves around finding food and not dying. You're hungry. Not, I skipped lunch. Hungry. Not, I'm on a diet. Hungry. You're, my body is consuming itself for energy. Hungry. The kind of hungry that makes you think about things you wouldn't normally think about eating. Somewhere in the darkness, something scurries. Rats, probably. Or some other small creature that's figured out caves are warmer than outside. Not by much, but enough. You've eaten rat before. It's not great, but it's protein. If you could see well enough to catch one, you'd try, but you can't, so you won't. The fire is out. Of course the fire is out. Someone was supposed to keep it going through the night, but clearly that didn't happen. Now you're faced with a choice. Try to rekindle it in the dark, or wait for enough daylight to filter into the cave entrance to see what you're doing. The problem with waiting is that you're already cold enough to make your teeth chatter, and moving around to gather kindling without light seems like a great way to trip and crack your skull open on a rock. You decide to wait, not because it's the smart choice, but because you're too cold and hungry and miserable to muster the energy to fumble around in the dark. So you sit there, wrapped in your disgusting animal hide, breathing in the fetid air, listening to the symphony of snores and coughs and scratches, and you wait for dawn. Welcome to day, one of the rest of your life in the Ice Age. And this is the easy part. This is you waking up. Just wait until you have to actually do something. Eventually, a dim gray light starts to creep into the cave entrance. It's not much, just enough to see vague shapes and shadows. But after the complete darkness, it feels like a spotlight. You can finally see the other people around you, huddled masses of fur and filth, slowly starting to stir. Nobody springs out of bed with enthusiasm. Nobody stretches and greets the day with a smile. Everyone moves slowly, reluctantly, like they're trying to delay the inevitable misery of being awake. You watch as an older woman near the entrance starts coughing again, that same wet cough that never seems to go away. Nobody checks on her. Everyone's dealing with their own problems. You need to pee. This is not a simple matter of walking to a bathroom. There is no bathroom. There's barely an outside the cave that counts as a bathroom. In the winter, which is basically always during the Ice Age, going outside to relieve yourself means exposing yourself to temperatures that could literally kill you. So people have developed a system, and by system, I mean they've designated a corner of the cave as the place where everyone does their business. You shuffle over to that corner, trying not to think too hard about what you're doing. The smell is overwhelming. There's no ventilation, no running water, no way to actually clean anything. You do what you need to do as quickly as possible, then shuffle back to your spot. Congratulations. You've just completed the first task of your morning routine. Your hands are now contaminated with things we don't need to discuss, and you have no way to wash them. Actually, scratch that. You have a way to wash them. Sort of. There's a small collection of snow and ice near the cave entrance that someone brought in yesterday. You walk over and rub your hands with the ice-cold water it's melting into. The water is so cold, it makes your hands ache. But at least you're making an attempt at hygiene. Not that it matters much. Within an hour, your hands will be covered in animal blood, dirt, and who knows what else. Now it's time to address your mouth. You run your tongue over your teeth. They feel fuzzy, coated. There are chunks of yesterday's meat still stuck between them. You reach for a small twig, one of those special twigs that everyone in your group knows to collect from a specific type of tree. You start chewing on one end of it until the fibers separate and it becomes brush-like. Then you scrub your teeth with it. It tastes like wood and hurt, but it's better than nothing. Sort of. The twig doesn't really get everything out. It especially doesn't help with the tooth that's been aching for the past week. You probe it gently with your tongue. The pain is sharp, immediate. There's definitely something wrong with it, but there's nothing you can do about it. Dentistry hasn't been invented yet. Your options are either live with the pain or have someone knock the tooth out with a rock if it gets bad enough. That's it. Those are your options. You notice one of the younger members of your group, maybe 19 or 20 years old, missing most of his teeth on one side. Not because someone knocked them out on purpose, but because they rotted and fell out on their own. He can barely chew meat anymore. His diet is limited to whatever can be softened with water or chewed on the other side of his mouth. You try not to think about the fact that you'll probably be in the same situation in a few years. Speaking of food, your stomach is still growling. You look around the cave for anything edible. There's a pile of bones in one corner, leftovers from whenever the last successful hunt was. You walk over and pick up one of the larger bones, a mammoth femur that still has some marrow in it. You take a rock and crack the bone open, then scoop out the fatty marrow with your fingers. It's cold and congealed, but it's calories, and that's all that matters. The marrow tastes rich and slightly rancid. You eat it anyway. You lick your fingers clean because wasting food isn't an option. Around you, others are doing the same thing, scavenging for whatever scraps remain from the last meal. There's no such thing as saving your appetite in the Ice Age. You eat when food is available because you never know when the next meal will come. You look down at yourself. Your clothes are a joke. You're wearing animal hides that are stitched together with sinew threads made from animal tendons. The stitching is rough, and the hides don't fit particularly well. They're bulky and stiff, and they rub against your skin in ways that create constant irritation. Underneath the hides, your skin is covered in a layer of grime that's built up over weeks, maybe months. You can't remember the last time you actually bathed. Bathing. Right. Let's talk about that. In the summer, people sometimes go to the river or stream to wash off. In the winter, that's not an option because the water is frozen, and even if it wasn't, exposing your wet skin to sub-freezing temperatures is a death sentence. So you don't bathe. Nobody bathes. You just exist in a state of progressive filthiness, and everyone around you does the same, so nobody even notices anymore. Well, almost nobody notices. Sometimes, when the wind blows in from the outside and you catch a breath of clean, cold air, you remember what it's like to smell something that isn't human funk and smoke. But those moments are rare. You scratch at your scalp. There are definitely lice up there. You can feel them moving. It's become so normal that you barely register it anymore. Everyone has lice. Everyone has fleas. It's just part of life, like being cold and hungry and tired all the time. The morning routine is complete. You're awake. You've relieved yourself. You've sort of cleaned your mouth. You've eaten a tiny amount of food that will do almost nothing to satisfy your hunger. And you've come to terms with the fact that you're disgustingly dirty and there's nothing you can do about it. Time to face the day, whatever that's going to bring. Now that you're fully awake and marginally functional, you start to notice the social dynamics of your cave. And let me tell you, if you thought your college roommate was bad, you haven't experienced anything yet. There are about 15 people living in this cave with you. That number fluctuates. Sometimes someone dies. Sometimes a baby is born. Sometimes someone from another group joins yours. Sometimes someone wanders off and never comes back. But right now, it's 15. 15 people in a space that's maybe the size of a large modern living room. 15 people with no privacy, no personal space, and no escape from each other for months at a time. You look around and take stock of who's who. There's the group leader, a man in his 30s, which makes him ancient by Ice Age standards. He's one of the few who's made it past 30, probably because he's smart enough to let younger men do most of the dangerous hunting while he makes strategic decisions. Or maybe he's just lucky. It's hard to tell. Then there are the hunters, 4 or 5 men in their 20s, who are responsible for bringing in the big game, mammoth mostly, because mammoth meat is what keeps everyone alive during the winter. These guys are the celebrities of your little community. When they make a kill, everyone eats. When they don't, everyone suffers. The social hierarchy is pretty simple. Hunters at the top, everyone else scrambling for position below them. One of the hunters is particularly annoying. Let's call him Grog, because why not? Grog is convinced he's the best hunter in the group, and he never shuts up about it. He's constantly telling stories about his exploits, embellishing details, making sure everyone knows just how brave and skilled he is. The problem is, he actually is pretty good, so nobody can really call him out on his bragging. You've learned to just tune him out when he starts talking. There are 3 women of childbearing age in the group, and they're responsible for most of the day-to-day work that keeps everyone alive. They process the animal hides, they maintain the fire when possible, they gather whatever plants and small game they can find, and they take care of the children. One of them is pregnant. Again. She's probably had 6 or 7 kids by now, though only 2 are still alive. Childbirth in the Ice Age is basically a coin flip. You either survive or you don't. The pregnant woman looks exhausted. She's sitting near the cave entrance, working on scraping an animal hide with a sharp stone. The work is monotonous and physically demanding, and she's doing it while growing another human inside her body and probably dealing with severe malnutrition. Nobody offers to help her. Everyone has their own tasks. There are 4 children in the group, ranging from maybe 3 years old to 13. The older kids are expected to contribute, gathering firewood, helping with hides, learning to make tools. The younger ones mostly just try not to die. One of them is crying right now, a thin, whining cry that grates on everyone's nerves, but that nobody has the energy to address. The mother eventually picks the kid up and nurses him, more to shut him up than out of any sense of maternal warmth. Then there are the older people, 2 of them, a man and a woman, both probably in their 40s or 50s, which makes them practically prehistoric. They're too old to hunt and too worn out to do much physical labor, but they serve a purpose. They remember things. They remember where the good hunting grounds are. They remember which plants are edible and which are poisonous. They remember the stories and strategies that have kept the group alive. As long as their memories are useful, they'll be kept around. Once they stop being useful, well, the Ice Age isn't kind to the elderly. You fit somewhere in the middle of this hierarchy. You're not a top hunter, but you're competent enough to help with kills. You're not a primary caregiver, but you chip in when needed. You're not a leader, but you're not at the bottom either. You're just there, surviving, trying not to piss anyone off enough to get exiled from the group, because exile means death. And that's the thing about cave living. You can't afford to have serious conflicts. If someone really pisses you off, you can't just move out and find a new place. You're stuck with these people, potentially for years. So everyone has developed a kind of tense tolerance for each other's annoying habits. Except when they don't. You remember last winter, when 2 of the hunters got into a fight over who deserved the choicest cuts of meat from a kill? It started with words, escalated to shoving, and ended with one of them getting a spear in the gut. He died 3 days later, screaming the whole time. Nobody mourned him. His death meant one less mouth to feed. That's the dark reality of Ice Age social politics. Cooperation is essential for survival, but resources are so scarce that conflict is inevitable. Sometimes that conflict turns violent. Sometimes people get killed. And sometimes, though nobody talks about this, the bodies of those enemies don't just get thrown out of the cave. You try not to think about the evidence archaeologists will find 18,000 years from now. Bones with cut marks, skulls that have been deliberately smashed open, remains thrown away with the trash like they were nothing. You try not to think about what that evidence suggests, about what happens to people who lose those violent conflicts. But right now, things are relatively peaceful. Tense, but peaceful. Grog is showing off a new spear point he's made. The pregnant woman is still scraping her hide. The kids are playing some kind of game with rocks that seems to mostly involve throwing them at each other. The old woman is telling a story to anyone who'll listen. Something about a great hunt from 20 years ago. You sit down near the fire pit, still unlit, because nobody's managed to get it going again yet, and start working on your own project, sharpening a stone tool that's become dull from use. The work is meditative, rhythmic, chip, chip, chip. It's one of the few tasks that doesn't require a lot of thought or energy. And right now, that's exactly what you need. Around you, everyone else is engaged in their own tasks, their own survival routines. Nobody's talking much. There's not a lot to say. You've all heard each other's stories 100 times. You know everyone's annoying habits, everyone's strengths, everyone's weaknesses. You know who snores the loudest, who farts the most, who eats more than their fair share when they think nobody's looking. This is your community, your tribe, your family, kind of. These are the people you'll live with, work with, and probably die with. And right now, as you sit in this cold, dark, smelly cave, surrounded by people you barely tolerate, you can't help but think, this is it. This is life. This is what existence looks like when survival is the only goal. Spoiler alert, it doesn't get better. After what feels like hours of sitting in the cave doing busy work, someone makes the executive decision that it's time to venture outside. The fire needs wood. The hunters need to check the area for game. Someone needs to see if the weather's going to get worse, or if maybe, just maybe, there'll be a brief window of slightly less miserable conditions. You're volunteered. Well, not volunteered exactly. More like you're able-bodied and not currently in the middle of a crucial task. So you're going. That's how decisions get made in the Ice Age. Democracy hasn't been invented yet. You wrap yourself in additional hides, layering them until you're so bulky you can barely move your arms. This is essential. The temperature outside is somewhere around a negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's not accounting for wind chill. Without proper insulation, you'd get frostbite within minutes and die of hypothermia within hours. 2 other people are coming with you, one of the younger hunters and one of the women who's good at identifying edible plants. Safety in numbers. Also, if one of you gets injured or killed, the other 2 can either help or at least bring back the news. You step toward the cave entrance. The light is brighter here, filtering in through the opening, and it takes your eyes a moment to adjust. When they do, you see it, the landscape of the Ice Age. It's white. Everything is white. Snow covers the ground in a thick blanket that extends as far as you can see. The sky is a pale gray, heavy with clouds that promise more snow to come. The wind is howling, a constant, relentless sound that's both eerie and exhausting. There are no trees nearby, just sparse vegetation poking through the snow here and there, tough grasses and shrubs that have somehow managed to survive in this frozen hellscape. You step outside. The cold hits you like a physical force. It doesn't matter how many layers you're wearing. The wind finds every gap, every opening, and drives the freezing air straight through to your skin. Your face, which is exposed because you need to be able to see and breathe, immediately starts to hurt. It's not just cold, it's painful. Your eyes water, your nose runs, your lips crack and bleed. The snow crunches under your feet. Each step requires effort because the snow is deep, sometimes up to your knees, and you're breaking trail as you walk. Your legs burn with exertion. Your breath comes in ragged gasps, and each inhalation of the frigid air sears your lungs. You're heading to a stand of trees, about half a mile from the cave. Half a mile doesn't sound like much, but in these conditions, it might as well be a marathon. You focus on putting one foot in front of the other, trying not to think about how much you want to turn back, how much you want to be anywhere but here. The hunter with you is scanning the landscape constantly, looking for signs of animals, fresh tracks in the snow, disturbed vegetation, the distant shape of a mammoth herd. Mammoths are the holy grail of Ice Age hunting. One mammoth can feed your entire group for weeks, provide hides for clothing and shelter, and bones for tools and fuel. But they're also incredibly dangerous. A full-grown Colombian mammoth stands over 13 feet tall and weighs around 10 tons. They're not aggressive unless threatened, but when they are threatened, they can crush you like an insect. The woman with you is looking for different signs, places where the snow is shallow enough that plant life might be accessible, areas where small animals might burrow, anything that could be foraged and brought back to supplement the group's diet. She's not having much luck. The snow is too deep, the temperature too cold, nothing is growing, nothing is accessible. You reach the trees. They're scraggly, half-dead things, but they have branches, and branches mean firewood. You start breaking off the dead wood, piling it up to carry back. The work warms you slightly. At least your core temperature rises from the exertion, but your extremities are going numb. Your fingers especially. You can barely feel them anymore, which makes grasping the branches difficult. That's when you hear it, a sound in the distance, low, rumbling. The hunter freezes, holding up a hand for silence. You all stop moving, stop breathing, and listen. It's coming closer. The rumbling becomes more distinct. Footsteps, heavy footsteps, and then you see it, emerging from behind a ridge of snow, a mammoth. It's alone, which is unusual. Mammoths typically travel in herds, but this one seems to have been separated somehow. It's huge, bigger than anything you've ever seen. Its brown fur is matted with ice and snow. Its curved tusks are easily 10 feet long, and its breath forms massive clouds of steam in the frigid air. The hunter's eyes light up. A solitary mammoth is vulnerable. It's still incredibly dangerous, but without the protection of a herd, it might be possible to take it down. He looks at you and the woman, then gestures back toward the cave. The message is clear. Get help. Get the other hunters. This is an opportunity. You drop your pile of firewood and start running, or what passes for running, in knee-deep snow back toward the cave. Your legs are screaming. Your lungs are burning. You're probably damaging something inside your body by exerting yourself this hard in these temperatures. But you don't care. A mammoth kill means survival. It means food. It means everyone gets to eat. You burst back into the cave, gasping, barely able to speak. You manage to get out the word mammoth, and suddenly everyone is moving. The hunters grab their spears, specially designed with sharpened stone points that have taken days to craft. They layer on extra hides. They prepare themselves mentally for what's about to be either a triumph or a disaster. You lead them back out into the frozen wasteland. The cold seems even worse now that you've had a brief respite in the relative warmth of the cave. Every step is agony, but you push through because you have to. When you get back to the location, The mammoth is still there. It's using its tusks to dig through the snow, trying to reach the vegetation buried underneath. It hasn't noticed your group yet. The hunters spread out, surrounding it, at a distance. They're not going to throw their spears. That's a common misconception about Ice Age hunting. Instead, they're going to plant them in the ground, angled upward, and then provoke the mammoth into charging. It's a horrifyingly dangerous strategy. If the mammoth charges and impales itself on the planted spears, great. If it charges and misses the spears, whoever provoked it is going to die. There's no middle ground. One of the hunters starts making noise, shouting and waving his arms. The mammoth turns its massive head, spots him, and lets out a sound that's part bellow, part scream. It's enraged, threatened, and it charges. Everything happens fast. The mammoth runs toward the hunter, who stands his ground until the last possible second before diving to the side. The mammoth can't stop. Its momentum carries it forward onto the planted spears. 3 of the spear points penetrate its chest and abdomen. The mammoth screams again, this time in pain, and thrashes wildly. One of its tusks nearly catches another hunter, missing by inches. It takes hours for the mammoth to die. Hours of it bleeding out, weakening gradually, while your group keeps a safe distance and watches. It's brutal. It's horrific, but it's also necessary. This is what survival looks like in the Ice Age. When it's finally over, when the mammoth has taken its last labored breath, the real work begins. Butchering a 10-ton animal with stone tools is an all-day affair. You cut through the thick hide, peel it back, and start harvesting meat. The meat is frozen almost immediately by the ambient temperature, which is actually helpful for preservation. You load as much as you can carry and make multiple trips back to the cave, bringing the bounty home. By the time you're done, the sun is setting. Not that you can really tell, since the sky has been gray all day. You're exhausted. Your body aches in places you didn't know could ache. Your hands are covered in blood and fat, and they're so cold, they've gone past numb into some new realm of pain. But you have meat, enough meat to last weeks, maybe longer. The cave is going to smell even worse once you start cooking and processing all of it. But that's a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, for the first time in weeks, everyone is going to eat until they're full. So you've got mammoth meat. Congratulations. You're about to discover that having food is almost as miserable as not having food, just in different ways. The first challenge is getting the meat back to the cave. You've already made several trips, hauling massive chunks of frozen mammoth flesh through knee-deep snow, and you're not even halfway done. Each piece weighs as much as you do, and carrying it requires draping it over your shoulders in a way that guarantees you'll be finding bits of frozen blood and fat in your hair for days. Your back is screaming, your legs are jelly, but you keep going because this is survival, and survival doesn't care about your comfort. By the time you get all the usable meat back to the cave, it's piled up in a corner, like some kind of grotesque sculpture. There's easily 1,000 pounds of it, maybe more. It's frozen solid, which is actually a blessing. At least it won't rot immediately. But it also means that when you want to eat it, you have to spend hours thawing it near the fire, assuming you can get the fire going again. Speaking of the fire, someone's finally managed to relight it. The process involved striking rocks together to create sparks, nursing those sparks into a tiny flame with dried grass and bark, and then gradually feeding it larger pieces of wood until it was sustainable. It took over an hour and required the kind of patience that's hard to muster when you're cold and hungry and irritable. But now it's burning, and the cave is starting to fill with warmth. And smoke, oh God, so much smoke. Here's the thing about fires in caves that nobody tells you. The smoke has nowhere to go. In theory, hot air rises and should escape through the cave opening. In practice, the way air circulates in a cave is complicated and depends on things like the cave's dimensions, the outside temperature, and where exactly the fire is located. Right now, the smoke is pooling near the ceiling and slowly spreading downward, creating a thick haze that makes your eyes water and your throat burn. Within 20 minutes of the fire being lit, the upper half of the cave is completely filled with smoke. You can't stand upright without choking. The only breathable air is within about 3 feet of the ground, so everyone is either sitting or lying down, huddled as close to the floor as possible. Your eyes are running, your nose is running, you're coughing constantly, that deep, lung-rattling cough that won't stop. But you need the fire. You need it for warmth, and you need it for cooking. So, you deal with the smoke. You lie flat on the ground when it gets too bad. You breathe through a piece of hide held over your mouth and nose. You accept that this is just how life is. Someone starts preparing the meat for cooking. This involves cutting it into smaller chunks with stone tools, a process that's harder than it sounds because mammoth meat is tough. And stone tools, despite being sharp, still require a lot of force and sawing motion to cut through flesh. The person doing the cutting is sweating despite the cold, breathing hard, occasionally stopping to wipe their eyes when the smoke gets too thick. Once the meat is in manageable pieces, it needs to be cooked. You don't have pots. You don't have pans. What you have are rocks. Specifically, you have rocks that have been heated in the fire until they're glowing hot, and a shallow pit lined with an animal hide that's been filled with water. Here's how it works. You use sticks to pick up the scorching hot rocks from the fire and drop them into the water-filled pit. The rocks hiss and steam, heating the water until it's boiling. Then you add the meat, and you wait, and wait, and wait. The meat takes hours to cook this way. Hours of constantly adding new hot rocks as the old ones cool down. Hours of tending the fire to keep it hot enough. Hours of breathing smoke and dealing with the steam that's now adding humidity to the already unpleasant cave atmosphere. The moisture from the cooking process condenses on the cool walls and ceiling of the cave, creating a constant drizzle of droplets that fall on you and your bedding. Everything gets damp, everything gets cold. But eventually, finally, the meat is cooked, or cooked enough. It's hard to tell in the dim, smoky light whether it's actually done, so you just pull out a piece and try it. It's tough. It's bland. It has the texture of shoe leather and tastes like slightly burned nothing. There are no spices, no salt, no seasoning of any kind, just mammoth meat, boiled in water, until it's technically edible. You eat it anyway. You tear off pieces with your teeth because your hands are too dirty and too cold to have much dexterity. You chew and chew and chew because the meat is so tough it doesn't want to break down. You swallow chunks that are probably too large and feel them scrape down your throat. You keep eating because this is the first real meal you've had in days, and you don't know when the next one will come. Around you, everyone else is doing the same thing, tearing, chewing, swallowing. There's very little conversation. Eating is work, and everyone's too focused on the task to socialize. The sounds in the cave are grotesque, smacking lips, grunting with effort, belching, the occasional sound of someone choking on a piece that was too big. Grog, predictably, is eating more than his fair share. He's managed to position himself closest to the cooking pit and is pulling out the choicest pieces before anyone else can get to them. Someone mutters a complaint. Grog ignores it. The social hierarchy is maintained through these small acts of dominance. The best hunters get the best food. Everyone else gets what's left. You eat until your stomach hurts, not because you're full. You're never truly full in the Ice Age, but because your stomach has shrunk from days of near starvation, and suddenly consuming a large quantity of food is overwhelming your digestive system. You're going to pay for this later, probably in the form of cramps and diarrhea, but that's a problem for future you. The pregnant woman is eating slowly, carefully. She needs the nutrition more than anyone, but her body is working against her. She looks nauseous. She manages a few bites, then stops, holding her hand over her mouth. She doesn't throw up, but it's a close thing. Nobody offers her sympathy. Everyone's dealing with their own discomfort. As people finish eating, they start gnawing on the bones, trying to extract every last bit of marrow and connective tissue. Nothing is wasted. The bones that are completely cleaned will be saved, some for tools, some for fuel, some just because it's better to have them than not. The bones that still have marrow will be cracked open later, and the fatty interior consumed. The fire is still burning, still filling the cave with smoke, but now it's also radiating actual warmth. And for the first time all day, you don't feel like you're actively freezing to death. It's a small mercy. You'll take it. You lean back against the cave wall, your stomach distended and aching, your eyes still watering from the smoke, your hands covered in grease and blood. This is what victory looks like in the Ice Age. This is what success feels like. Spoiler alert, it's not great. The day after the feast, you wake up to a new problem. Your clothes are falling apart. Well, clothes is a generous term. What you're wearing are animal hides that have been scraped clean of flesh and fat, somewhat crudely stitched together with sinew, and draped over your body in a way that provides minimal coverage and even less warmth. They were never great to begin with, and weeks of constant wear, exposure to smoke and moisture, and your own body's oils and sweat have degraded them to the point where they're barely functional. There's a hole forming under your left arm. The seam has split, probably from the strain of all that mammoth hauling yesterday. Cold air whistles through the gap every time you move. It's not a huge hole yet, but it will be if you don't fix it. And fixing it requires tools, materials, and time that you're not sure you have. The woman who's good with hide working beckons you over. She's sitting near the cave entrance where the light is better, surrounded by her tools, scrapers made from sharp-edged stones, awls made from sharpened bone, and needles, precious needles, carved from animal bone, with tiny holes punched through one end for threading sinew. These needles are miracles of Ice Age technology. Each one took hours to make, carefully shaping a sliver of bone, grinding it smooth, then painstakingly creating a hole small enough to be functional, but large enough to thread sinew through. They break easily. When one breaks, it's a genuine crisis, because making a replacement is so labor-intensive. The woman guards her needles jealously, and you don't blame her. She examines your torn hide with the critical eye of someone who spent her entire life working with animal skins. She clicks her tongue, not a good sign, and starts explaining what needs to be done. First, you need sinew for thread. Sinew is the tendon from an animal, usually from the legs or back, and it needs to be dried, separated into individual fibers, and then twisted together to create a thread that's strong enough to hold under tension. You go to the pile of mammoth remains and start working on extracting sinew from one of the legs. This involves cutting away the meat around the tendon, carefully removing the tendon without damaging it, then laying it out to dry. Except nothing dries quickly in the Ice Age. The air is too cold and too damp, so you end up holding the sinew near the fire, trying to speed up the process without burning it. The smoke makes your eyes water. Again, you're starting to feel like watering eyes are just your default state of existence. Once the sinew is dry enough, you start pulling it apart into thinner strands. This requires a delicate touch too rough, and you'll break it, too gentle, and you won't separate it. Your fingers are cold and clumsy, and you break 3 strands before you finally manage to separate one properly. You twist it between your palms to create a thread. It's not pretty, but it'll work. Now comes the actual sewing. The woman hands you one of her precious needles and demonstrates the technique. Push the awl through the hide first to create a hole, then use the needle to pull the sinew through. It sounds simple. It's not. The hide is stiff and resistant. The awl requires real force to punch through, and you have to be careful not to let it slip and stab yourself, because if you stab yourself, you'll get an infection, and infections in the Ice Age are often fatal. The needle is delicate and keeps threatening to break every time you pull the sinew through. The sinew itself keeps tangling or breaking or slipping out of the needle's eye. It takes you over an hour to close that one small hole. 1 hour of painstaking, frustrating work in dim light while breathing smoke and trying not to freeze. When you're done, the seam is lumpy and uneven, but it's closed. The hide won't keep tearing, at least not in that spot. You look down at yourself and realize there are at least a dozen other places where your clothes are wearing thin or starting to split. This is going to be an ongoing maintenance issue. Welcome to Ice Age fashion. It's all about damage control. The woman is working on a new hide now, preparing it to be made into clothing. The process is extensive and disgusting. First, the hide needs to be scraped clean of all flesh and fat, a job that requires stone scrapers and hours of labor. She's bent over the hide, scraping rhythmically, and the smell of rancid fat fills the already odorous cave. Once the hide is scraped, it needs to be softened, or it'll be as stiff as cardboard. The softening process involves working the hide, stretching it, massaging it, sometimes chewing it. Yes, chewing it. You've seen people sit for hours with a piece of hide in their mouth, chewing and chewing to break down the fibers and make it supple. The leather tastes terrible, leaves your jaw aching, and makes your teeth hurt, but it's the most effective method available. Some people use a different softening method. They rub brain matter into the hide. Animal brains contain oils that help break down the fibers and make the leather soft and pliable. But this means someone has to crack open a skull, scoop out the brain, and then spend time working it into the hide. It's messy, smelly, and deeply unpleasant. But it works, so people do it. You watch as one of the younger members of the group practices cutting hide with a stone blade. The blade is sharp, dangerously sharp, but it's also brittle. If you hit a tough spot in the hide, the blade can chip or break, ruining the tool and potentially the hide. Cutting a hide to make a garment requires planning. You need to minimize waste, maximize coverage, and account for the irregular shape of most animal skins. There's no such thing as a good fit in Ice Age clothing. The best you can hope for is covers most of your body and stays on when you move. The hides are bulky and stiff. The seams are rough and often rub against your skin, creating irritation and sometimes sores. The whole outfit weighs a lot. You're basically wearing multiple layers of heavy leather, and it restricts your movement. In the winter, you need all those layers. You need the bulk and the insulation, even if it's uncomfortable. In the summer, summer, as if summer is actually warm during the Ice Age, you'd love to shed some layers, but then you'd be exposed to the sun and wind, which bring their own problems. You look around the cave at everyone's clothing. It's all roughly the same. Layers of animal hide, poorly fitted, held together with crude stitching, showing signs of wear and damage. Nobody looks good. Nobody is comfortable. Fashion is purely functional, and even then, it barely functions. The pregnant woman's clothes are especially problematic. Her growing belly means nothing fits right anymore. She's had to let out seams and add extra pieces of hide to accommodate her changing body. The result is a patchwork outfit that looks even more ridiculous than usual. She's uncomfortable. You can tell. She keeps trying to adjust the hides, trying to find a position where they don't dig into her or restrict her breathing. There isn't one. One of the children has outgrown their clothes. The kid's wrists and ankles are sticking out, exposed to the cold. Someone will need to make new clothes for them, which means processing a new hide, cutting it to size, stitching it together. Hours and hours of work. Nobody volunteers. Everyone's too busy with their own tasks. The kid will just have to be cold for a while longer. You finish your repair work and hand the needle back to the woman. She inspects your stitching, nods once, which you take as approval, and goes back to her own work. You pull your newly repaired hide back on. It's still stiff. It still smells like smoke and body odor and animal fat. But the hole is closed, and that's what matters. Congratulations. You've successfully participated in Ice Age Fashion Week. The runway is a cave floor covered in scraps and debris. The models are all malnourished and covered in dirt, and the designer collection consists of vaguely functional animal hides. At least you're not naked. That's something, right? It's evening now, or what passes for evening in the Ice Age, where time is measured more by light levels than by any actual clock. The fire is still burning, still filling the cave with smoke, still providing the bare minimum of warmth to keep everyone from freezing. People are settling in for the night, arranging their sleeping hides, checking on the food supply, doing the small maintenance tasks that keep life marginally functional. And then someone says the most dangerous words in the Ice Age: I'm bored. Boredom is a real problem when your entire existence revolves around survival. When you're not actively hunting, gathering, or processing materials, you're left with hours of time to fill and absolutely nothing to fill it with. There's no TV, no books, no smartphones, no internet, no music except what you can make with your own voices or by hitting things together. So what do people do for entertainment? Sit around and stare at rocks, basically. Okay, that's not entirely fair. There are activities. They're just limited. Someone starts telling a story, the same story you've heard 100 times before, about a great hunt that happened years ago. The details get more embellished with each telling. The mammoth gets bigger, the danger gets greater, the hunter gets braver. Nobody calls out the exaggerations because everyone knows that's just how stories work. The kids are playing a game that involves throwing small stones at a target. It's not sophisticated, but it serves a dual purpose: entertainment and practice for hunting. One of the older kids is getting pretty good. Their accuracy is improving. In a few years, they'll be a full hunter, contributing to the group's survival, assuming they survive that long. One of the men is working on a new spear point, carefully chipping away at a piece of flint to create a sharp edge. This is both practical work and entertainment, the kind of meditative task that occupies your hands and mind without requiring intense concentration. Chip, chip, chip. The sound echoes in the cave, mixing with the crackle of the fire and the murmur of conversation. Someone starts humming. It's not really a melody, more like a rhythmic sound that fills the silence. Others join in. The humming becomes a kind of group activity, a way to connect without words. There are no instruments, no formal music, just human voices making sounds in the darkness. You realize this is what passes for a concert in the Ice Age. You try not to think about all the music that won't be invented for thousands of years. All the instruments, the compositions, the genres. Right now, you have humming, and that's it. The old woman starts teaching one of the children about edible plants. She describes each one in detail: what it looks like, where it grows, how to tell if it's safe to eat. The child listens intently because this knowledge could literally save their life someday. This is the Ice Age educational system: oral tradition and practical demonstration. There's no writing, no books, no way to record information except in people's memories. If the old woman dies, all that knowledge dies with her, unless she's successfully passed it on. That's why the elderly are kept around as long as they're useful. They're living libraries of survival information. Grog is showing off again, this time demonstrating how he made his last kill. He's acting it out with exaggerated movements, miming the thrust of a spear, the charge of the animal. People watch because what else are they going to do? At least it's marginally more interesting than staring at the cave wall. You notice two people in the corner having what looks like an intense conversation. It's hard to hear what they're saying over the ambient noise of the cave, but their body language suggests disagreement. One of them makes a sharp gesture, the other responds with a shove. Tensions are rising. This is another form of entertainment in the Ice Age, watching social drama unfold. Who's allied with whom? Who's angry at whom? Who's competing for status or resources or mating opportunities? It's like reality TV, except the stakes are life and death, and there's no commercial break. The argument escalates. Voices are raised. Now everyone is paying attention because cave fights are serious business. There's nowhere to escape to, no way to avoid the fallout. The group leader intervenes, stepping between the two arguers, speaking in low, firm tones. Whatever he says seems to work. The tension diffuses. The arguers separate and go to opposite sides of the cave. Crisis averted. For now. But you know this isn't over. Grudges last a long time when you're living in close quarters with limited resources. That argument will resurface eventually, probably escalate further. You try not to think about what happened last winter when an argument turned deadly. One of the children asks for a story, a specific story about how fire was discovered. The old man takes up the tale, speaking slowly, dramatically. It's mythology, you realize, oral tradition being passed down, explaining the world through narrative. The child listens with wide eyes, totally absorbed. This is their education, their entertainment, their cultural heritage, all wrapped into one story told by firelight. Someone passes around a piece of mammoth bone that's been carved with simple lines and marks. It's decorative. One of the few things in the cave that serves no practical purpose. People take turns examining it, running their fingers over the carvings. This is Ice Age art. This is culture. It's primitive, but it's proof that even in the harshest conditions, humans create beauty. The fire is dying down. Someone adds more wood, carefully arranging it to maximize heat and minimize smoke, a futile effort. But they try anyway. The flames flare up, casting dancing shadows on the cave walls. Those shadows are probably the most visually interesting thing anyone's seen all day. You're tired, exhausted really. The physical labor of the past day, the constant cold, the poor nutrition, it's all catching up with you. Your body wants sleep, but your mind is still somewhat alert, caught in that liminal space between wakefulness and rest. Around you, people are starting to lie down on their sleeping hides. The cave is gradually quieting. The conversations fade to murmurs, then to silence. The only sounds are the fire crackling, someone coughing, someone snoring. This is nighttime entertainment in the Ice Age. Going to sleep because there's literally nothing else to do. You arrange your hides, trying to find a position that's less uncomfortable than the others. There isn't one. Everything hurts. But you're horizontal, and that's an improvement over vertical. As you lie there in the darkness, breathing in the smoky air, listening to the sounds of a dozen other people trying to sleep in too small a space, you think, tomorrow will be exactly like today. Wake up cold and hungry. Do tasks that are necessary for survival. Maybe eat if there's food. Deal with social tensions. Make repairs to clothing and tools. Entertain yourself with rocks and stories. Go to sleep. Repeat. This is life. This is what existence looks like for humans in the Ice Age. Survival wrapped in monotony, punctuated by occasional crises. Sweet dreams, listener. At least your bed is comfortable and your entertainment options are limitless. Try not to take that for granted. You're not asleep. Not really. You're in that half-conscious state where every sound seems amplified. Every shift in the darkness feels threatening. The fire has died down to embers, not enough light to see by, but enough to cast weird, flickering shadows that your brain insists are moving toward you. Someone is snoring. Multiple someones, actually. The sound echoes off the cave walls, creating a chorus of rumbling, whistling, and occasional choking noises that would be funny if it weren't so annoying. You try to tune it out. You can't. You've been trying for what feels like hours. Then you hear it, a sound from outside the cave. Not the wind, not snow falling, something else, something moving. You freeze. Every muscle in your body tenses. You're suddenly completely awake. You lie there, not breathing, straining to hear. There it is again, a low sound, heavy, getting closer. Next to you, someone else is awake now too. You can tell by the change in their breathing. They heard it. The sound ripples through the cave as people wake up one by one, silent, terrified. Nobody moves. Nobody speaks. Everyone just listens. Cave bear. It has to be a cave bear. They use caves for hibernation, and sometimes they come back to a cave that's already occupied by humans. When that happens, you have a problem. Cave bears are massive, up to 1,500 pounds of muscle, fat, and bad attitude. They're generally not aggressive toward humans unless they're threatened or hungry or defending their territory. Unfortunately, a cave occupied by humans counts as threatening their territory. The sound is right outside the entrance now. You can hear breathing heavy, animal breathing. Your heart is hammering so hard, you're sure the bear can hear it. The group leader is slowly, quietly reaching for his spear. Others are doing the same. But everyone knows that fighting a cave bear in a confined space is suicide. The bear is too big, too strong, too dangerous. The breathing stops. There's silence, terrible, suffocating silence. Minutes pass. Nobody moves. You're not sure if the bear left or if it's just standing there, deciding whether to investigate further. Then the breathing starts again, but it's moving away. Slowly. The sound gradually fades. The bear decided the cave wasn't worth the trouble. Or maybe it wasn't a bear at all. Maybe it was something else. You'll never know. It takes another hour before anyone relaxes enough to try sleeping again. And even then, everyone sleeps lighter, more aware of the fact that you're not the only creatures looking for shelter from the cold. Cave bears, cave lions, saber-toothed cats, dire wolves. They all need refuge from the Ice Age weather, and caves are prime real estate. You remember hearing about a group 3 caves over who weren't so lucky. A saber-toothed cat came into their cave in the middle of the night. Those 8-inch fangs are designed for killing, for puncturing throats, for creating massive blood loss, for inducing suffocation. The cat killed 2 people before the rest of the group managed to drive it off with fire and spears. The bodies were buried under rocks. Life went on. That's the reality of the Ice Age night shift. You're not the apex predator, You're just one species among many, all competing for resources, all trying to survive. Humans have advantages: intelligence, tools, fire, cooperation. But a single human alone in the dark is prey. Even a group of humans in a cave is vulnerable. You think about the cave lions that sometimes hunt in coordinated groups, not unlike humans. They have competition from cave hyenas, from wolves, from saber-toothed cats. Everyone is hunting the same prey: mammoth, bison, horse, reindeer. Everyone is fighting for the same caves. Everyone is trying to make it through the winter. The darkness feels heavier now, more oppressive. You are acutely aware of how thin the barrier is between you and the frozen wilderness outside. Just the cave entrance. Just some piled rocks and hanging hides that wouldn't stop anything that really wanted to get in. You pull your sleeping hide tighter around yourself. It doesn't help. The fear is bone deep now, mixed with the cold and the hunger and the exhaustion. You close your eyes and try to convince yourself that sleep is possible, that tomorrow will come, that you'll survive another night. Maybe you will. Maybe you won't. That's the ice age for you. Every night is a gamble. 3 days later, the pregnant woman goes into labor. It starts in the middle of the day, a mercy at least, because there's some light to see by. She's been having contractions on and off for hours, but now they're coming faster, harder. She's making sounds, low moans that she's trying to suppress because showing weakness is dangerous in a group this size. But the pain is too much. The moans become cries. The other women gather around her. They've done this before, multiple times. They know what to expect, which is somehow both comforting and terrifying because they know how bad it can get. One of them starts preparing the area, laying out hides, getting water heated by the fire. Another is checking the woman's progress, speaking to her in low, calm tones. You're not directly involved in this. Men generally aren't during childbirth. But you're in the same cave, and there's nowhere to go to escape the sounds, the smells, the visceral reality of what's happening. So you sit in a corner with the other men and the older children and try to pretend you're doing something useful with your hands, sharpening a tool, sorting through bones, anything to look busy. The labor goes on for hours, hours of the woman screaming, crying, begging for it to be over. There's no pain relief, no epidural, no medication of any kind, just raw, unfiltered agony and the knowledge that this is what every woman goes through to bring new life into the world. You can see blood, too much blood maybe, but you're not sure what's normal and what isn't. The women attending her seem concerned, but not panicked. They're encouraging her to push, supporting her body, doing everything they can with the limited knowledge and tools available. The baby comes just as the sun is setting. It's tiny, covered in blood and fluid, barely moving. For a moment, everyone holds their breath. Is it alive? Did it survive the birth? Then it cries, a thin, reedy wail that fills the cave. The tension breaks. People exhale. The baby is alive. The mother is alive. This is a victory. Even though the woman looks half dead from blood loss and exhaustion. One of the attending women cuts the umbilical cord with a sharp stone tool, then ties it off with sinew. She cleans the baby as best she can with water and soft hide, then wraps it in furs and hands it to the mother. The mother looks down at the tiny creature in her arms with an expression that's hard to read. Relief, love, fear, probably all three. The afterbirth comes next, a disgusting mass of tissue and blood that gets wrapped in hides and will be disposed of later. The women clean up the mother, make her as comfortable as possible on a pile of furs, and then step back to let her rest. But there's no real rest, not in the Ice Age. The baby needs to nurse, and nursing is going to be painful for the first few days until the mother's body adjusts. The baby is going to cry a lot because babies cry, and there's nothing anyone can do about it except to try to soothe it. The mother needs to recover, but she also needs to eat, to stay warm, to avoid infection from any tears or damage caused by the birth. You look at the baby, this tiny, fragile creature that weighs maybe 6 pounds and is utterly helpless. The odds are not in its favor. Studies from modern research suggest that about 27% of infants failed to survive their first year in prehistoric times, and about 47.5% failed to survive to puberty. Those aren't great numbers. Roughly 1 in 4 chance this baby won't see its first birthday. Roughly half chance it won't make it to adolescence. The mother knows this. Everyone knows this. That's why there's a certain emotional distance in how people interact with infants. Not cruelty, just a protective mechanism. Don't get too attached until you know they're going to survive. It's brutal, but it's realistic. The main threats are infection, malnutrition, accidents, predators, and simple bad luck. Babies in the Ice Age don't have vaccines, don't have antibiotics, don't have modern medicine of any kind. If they get sick, their only defense is their own immune system. If they get injured, their only treatment is whatever remedies the group has learned through trial and error. And then there's the mother's survival to consider. Childbirth is dangerous, even with modern medical care. In the Ice Age, it's one of the leading causes of death for women of childbearing age. Postpartum hemorrhage, infections, complications from tears or damage. Any of these can be fatal. The mother survived this birth, but she's had 7 pregnancies. Only 2 of her previous children are still alive. And each birth takes a toll on her body, weakening her, making the next pregnancy more dangerous. You watch as she tries to nurse the baby. The baby is struggling to latch, crying in frustration. The mother is exhausted and in pain, but she persists because this is what has to happen if the baby is going to survive. Eventually, the baby manages to nurse. The crying stops. There's a moment of quiet in the cave. It doesn't last. Within an hour, the baby is crying again. Within 2 hours, it's developed a pattern. Cry, nurse, sleep for 20 minutes, cry again. This pattern will continue relentlessly for weeks. Nobody in the cave will get a full night's sleep. Everyone will be irritable and exhausted. But this is life. This is what happens when a new human joins the group. You think about all the babies that won't be born, all the potential humans who never made it past conception or were lost to miscarriage or stillbirth. You think about all the children who died in their first year, their first 5 years, their first 10 years. The human population of the Ice Age is kept low, not by predators or starvation, though those are factors, but by the simple biological reality that making more humans is difficult and keeping them alive is even harder. But this baby survived its birth, its nursing, its breathing. It has a chance, not a great chance, but a chance. And in the Ice Age, a chance is all anyone gets. 2 weeks after the baby's birth, the weather turns. You wake up to a sound that makes your stomach drop. Wind. Not normal wind. Not the constant background howl that you've grown accustomed to. This is something else. This is the sound of air moving so fast and so violently that it seems alive, seems malicious. You peer toward the cave entrance. The gray morning light that usually filters in is almost completely blocked by something white and swirling. Snow, but not normal snowfall. This is a blizzard. Blizzards in the Ice Age are catastrophic events. They combine sub-freezing temperatures, heavy snowfall, and wind speeds that can exceed 35 miles per hour, sometimes much more. The result is near zero visibility, wind chill factors that can cause frostbite in minutes, and snow accumulation that can bury entire landscapes. The group leader assesses the situation quickly. Nobody leaves the cave. Not for hunting, not for gathering firewood, not for anything. Going out in a blizzard is suicide. You can't see where you're going. You can't breathe properly because the wind drives snow into your nose and mouth, and you can freeze to death in less than an hour. So you're trapped, all 15 people, plus the newborn baby, trapped in the cave for however long this storm lasts. Could be a day, could be a week. There's no way to know. The first problem is wood. The fire is still burning, but the wood pile is getting low. You needed to gather more yesterday, but nobody did because the weather seemed okay and there were other priorities. Now you're going to pay for that oversight. The group collectively decides to ration the wood, keeping the fire just barely going to conserve fuel. The temperature in the cave drops immediately. Without a strong fire, there's nothing to counteract the cold air coming in from outside. You can see your breath. Your hands and feet go numb. Everyone huddles closer together, sharing body heat, layering on every available hide. The second problem is food. You still have mammoth meat from the recent kill, but it's frozen solid and scattered outside the cave where it won't rot. Going outside to get it means exposing yourself to the blizzard. The first person who tries makes it maybe 10 feet from the cave entrance before turning back, gasping, face already showing signs of frostbite. It's not worth it. You'll have to make do with whatever food is already inside the cave. That amounts to some bones, with scrapings of marrow and a few handfuls of dried plant matter that someone had saved for 15 people, for potentially days. You do the math. It's not good. By the second day of the blizzard, everyone is hungry. Again. The brief period of plenty after the mammoth kill is over, replaced by the familiar, gnawing emptiness in your stomach. The baby is crying more, whether from hunger, because the mother's milk is diminishing due to her own malnutrition, or just from the general misery of the situation. You can't tell. Probably both. The cave is filled with tension. People are irritable from cold, hunger, and forced proximity. Small disagreements erupt into arguments. The argument from a few weeks ago resurfaces, old grudges still festering. The group leader has to intervene multiple times to prevent violence. By the third day, the blizzard shows no signs of stopping. The snow has piled up at the cave entrance, partially blocking it, which actually helps with insulation, but also makes the cave darker and more claustrophobic. You can hear the wind howling outside, a constant assault on your nerves. Someone suggests they could burn bones for fuel. Bones do burn, especially the fatty ones, and it would extend your heat supply. The problem is that bones also create toxic smoke when they burn, and the cave is already poorly ventilated. But hypothermia versus smoke inhalation, you have to choose your poison. They burn the bones. The smoke becomes even thicker, even more acrid. Everyone is coughing constantly now, eyes streaming. But at least there's some warmth. You think about ice storms, a different but equally deadly winter weather phenomenon where freezing rain coats everything in thick layers of ice. You've seen the aftermath of those: trees snapping under the weight of ice, animals trapped and dying because they can't move. The landscape transformed into a glittering death trap. Blizzards are more immediate in their danger, but ice storms are insidious, creating conditions that persist long after the storm itself has passed. By the fourth day, the wind finally starts to calm. The snow is still falling, but lighter now. Visibility is improving. Someone ventures outside and reports that the snow is waist deep in some places. The mammoth meat is buried, but recoverable. The world is white and silent and deadly cold. You dig out the meat, hauling it back inside with numb, fumbling hands. You get the fire built back up to a proper level, burning through wood at an unsustainable rate. Because everyone is so desperately cold, you cook meat and eat it and feel the life slowly returning to your fingers and toes. The baby survived. The mother survived. Everyone survived. This time. But the blizzard season is just beginning. There will be more storms, more periods of being trapped, cold, hungry, and terrified. This is winter in the Ice Age. This is what survival looks like when the weather itself is trying to kill you. Spoiler alert, the weather usually wins. 3 days after the blizzard ends, one of the younger hunters, let's call him Thak, is working on making a new spear point. He's sitting near the fire for light, surrounded by pieces of flint, a hammerstone, and various failed attempts scattered around him. Flint knapping is essential work. Without sharp stone tools, you can't hunt effectively, can't butcher animals, can't process hides, can't do most of the tasks required for survival. But it's also dangerous. Incredibly dangerous. More dangerous than most people realize. Thak strikes the flint with his hammerstone, trying to chip off a flake to shape the point. The angle is wrong. The stone splits unexpectedly. A razor-sharp shard of flint flies up and slices across his left hand. The cut is deep enough that you can see white inside it. White that you realize with horror is probably tendon. Blood, immediate and profuse. It's pouring from the wound, dripping onto the cave floor, spattering on the stones and hides around him. Thak drops the flint and grabs his wrist with his other hand, trying to apply pressure, but the blood keeps coming. Everyone stops what they're doing. This is bad. This is potentially very bad. In the modern world, this injury would require stitches, antibiotics, proper bandaging, maybe even surgery if the tendon is damaged. In the Ice Age, you have none of those things. someone brings over a piece of hide relatively clean by Ice Age standards, which means it's been scraped and dried, but still probably harbors all kinds of bacteria. They wrap it around Thak's hand, tight, trying to slow the bleeding. The hide immediately soaks through with blood. They add another layer, and another. The bleeding eventually slows. Not stops, just slows to a seep rather than a gush. Thak's face is pale. He's probably going into shock from blood loss and pain. Someone makes him lie down, elevates his hand. These are good instincts, probably learned through generations of trial and error. But here's the problem. Even if the bleeding stops completely, even if Thak doesn't die from blood loss, the wound is contaminated. His hand was dirty, covered in dirt, animal fat, who knows what else. The flint that cut him was dirty. The hide they're using as a bandage is dirty. Everything is dirty in the Ice Age, and there's no way to properly clean anything. Studies of modern flint knappers people who practice this craft as a hobby show that injuries are incredibly common. Of the 173 people surveyed in one study, most reported multiple injuries, ranging from minor cuts to severe lacerations requiring medical attention. And these are people with access to bandages, antiseptic, antibiotics, and emergency rooms. For Ice Age humans, a severe cut from flint knapping could easily become infected, and infection in the Ice Age is often a death sentence. There are no antibiotics, no sterile conditions, no understanding of germ theory or how infections actually work. You watch as they check on Thak periodically over the next few hours. The bleeding has stopped, which is good. The hand is swelling, which is less good. By evening, the hand is noticeably warm to the touch. By the next morning, there are red streaks running up his forearm. Infection, blood poisoning, whatever you want to call it, it's spreading. Thak is feverish now, sweating despite the cold, alternating between chills and feeling like he's burning up. The wound itself has developed a smell, not the smell of blood, but something else, something rotten. The group tries remedies they know. Someone makes a poultice from certain plants and applies it to the wound. It probably does nothing, but at least it's an attempt. Someone else suggests bleeding him, letting out the bad blood, but the group leader vetoes this because Thak has already lost too much blood. There's nothing else to try. No other treatments, no other options. You just have to wait and see if Thak's body can fight off the infection on its own. He can't. 3 days after the initial cut, Thak is delirious with fever. His hand is grossly swollen, the skin tight and shiny. The red streaks have progressed past his elbow. He's barely conscious, mumbling things that don't make sense. 4 days after the cut, he's dead. The cause of death, a simple accident while making tools. The kind of thing that happens all the time, that most modern flint knappers experience and treat with a bandage and maybe some antibiotic ointment. But in the Ice Age, it's fatal. The group wraps Thak's body in hides and carries it outside. They'll bury him under rocks, not out of sentiment, but to keep scavengers from dragging the corpse back to the cave. There's no funeral, no long mourning period. People are sad, sure, but sadness is a luxury you can't afford for long when survival requires constant work. Someone will need to take over Thak's duties, Someone will need to finish making that spear point he was working on, because the group still needs tools. Life goes on. Death is just part of the background noise of existence in the Ice Age. You think about all the ways someone can get injured: cuts from sharp stones or tools, burns from the fire, frostbite from exposure to cold, animal bites, broken bones from falls or hunting accidents. Each one is potentially deadly. There is no such thing as a minor injury in the Ice Age. Every wound is a roll of the dice. Will it get infected? Will the infection spread? Will your immune system be strong enough to fight it off? Or has the constant malnutrition and stress weakened you too much? Thak was young, strong, healthy by Ice Age standards, and he died from a cut on his hand. That's the reality. That's what life looks like when medicine doesn't exist yet. Welcome to the Ice Age, where a papercut can kill you. Spoiler alert, most things can kill you. Weeks pass, then months. The mammoth meat runs out, gets replenished by another hunt, runs out again. The baby grows slightly, cries slightly less, still has roughly a 50-50 chance of surviving to adulthood. The blizzards come and go. The fire burns. The cave fills with smoke. People get sick, sometimes recover, sometimes don't. And you start to realize something truly horrifying. This is it. This is life. There's no variation, no vacation, no weekend, no holidays, just an endless cycle of wake up, survive, sleep, repeat. Every morning is the same. You wake up cold and stiff on the cave floor, breathing in smoke and the smell of unwashed bodies. You eat if there's food. You don't if there isn't. You do whatever tasks are necessary that day: gathering firewood, processing hides, making tools, hunting if conditions permit. The tasks themselves are mind-numbingly repetitive. Scraping hides takes hours, days even. You sit there with your stone scraper, removing tiny bits of flesh and fat with each stroke, and you do this until your hands cramp and your back aches and you can't feel your fingers from the cold. And then tomorrow, you do it again. Making stone tools is similarly tedious. Chip, chip, chip. Each flake has to be precisely placed, precisely struck. One mistake, and you've ruined hours of work. You go through dozens of attempts before you get one usable tool, and you need to make multiple tools because they break, or get lost, or wear out. Gathering firewood is a daily chore when the weather permits. You venture out into the frozen landscape, break off dead branches, haul them back to the cave. Your arms are full of wood. Your face is numb from cold, and you're always hyper-aware of the possibility of predators. This is entertainment. This is variety. This is the exciting part of your day. The social dynamics never change either. Grog is still annoying, still bragging, still eating more than his share. The pregnant woman, well, she's not pregnant anymore. But give it a year, and she probably will be again. The old woman is getting older, weaker, closer to the point where she won't be useful enough to keep around. The children are growing, learning, slowly being integrated into the workforce. Arguments happen. They're usually about the same things: food distribution, work assignments, perceived slights, or disrespect. The group leader mediates. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes tensions escalate to violence, and then someone else dies. and the group gets slightly smaller, and life continues. There's no concept of progress, no sense that things are getting better or that you're working towards some future goal. You're not building toward retirement. You're not saving for your children's education. You're not planning a vacation or a career change. You're just surviving, day after day, with no end point in sight except death. The seasons change, but only slightly. Winter is brutally cold. Summer is slightly less cold and has a few more daylight hours. That's it. That's the extent of seasonal variation during the Ice Age. There's no spring bloom of flowers, no fall display of changing leaves, just gradations of frozen misery. Sometimes you try to mark time by significant events. The mammoth hunt was 3 months ago. 4? It's hard to tell. There's no calendar, no way to track days except by counting sunrises, and who has the energy to do that? Time becomes fluid, meaningless. Did that blizzard happen last week? Or last year? Was Thak alive recently? Or was that a long time ago? The monotony is broken only by crises. Someone gets injured. A predator threatens the cave. A blizzard traps everyone inside. Food runs dangerously low. These are the memorable moments, and they're all negative. There are no good surprises in the Ice Age. No unexpected windfalls. Only unexpected disasters. You start to understand why oral tradition and storytelling are so important. They're literally the only form of entertainment that doesn't require physical resources. You can tell the same stories over and over, and people listen, because what else are they going to do? The stories get embellished, become legends, transform into mythology, but at their core, they're just a way to fill the endless hours of doing nothing. The psychological toll is probably worse than the physical toll. Though you don't have words for concepts like depression or boredom or existential dread, you just know that waking up every day to the same cold cave, the same people, the same tasks, the same struggles, feels like being trapped in a nightmare you can't escape. And you can't escape. Where would you go? You could try joining another group, but they probably have the same problems you do. You could try surviving alone, but that's basically suicide. Humans in the Ice Age survive through cooperation, and a lone individual has almost no chance. So you stay. You wake up. You do the tasks. You eat if you can. You sleep. You wake up again, and again, and again, for years, for decades, if you're incredibly unlucky enough to live that long. This is the part of Ice Age survival that nobody talks about, not the dramatic hunts, or the dangerous predators, or the life-threatening weather. It's the crushing, relentless monotony of existence without any hope for change. Welcome to Groundhog Day, except Bill Murray isn't here, and there's no tomorrow where things get better. There's just more of the same, forever, until you die. Then, after what feels like an eternity of winter, something changes. The temperature rises. Not dramatically, you're not talking about spring flowers and sunshine. You're talking about temperatures climbing from well below zero to just barely above freezing. But after months of brutal cold, even this small change is noticeable. The snow starts to melt, slowly at first, then faster. Water drips from the cave entrance, creating puddles on the floor. The landscape outside transitions from white to a muddy, slushy, gray-brown. This is what passes for spring in the Ice Age. You'd think this would be good news. You'd be wrong. The first problem is that everything you've been using for cold storage, the frozen mammoth meat piled outside the cave, starts to thaw. And when meat thaws, it rots. Fast. Meat that's been frozen for months suddenly has a shelf life of days, maybe hours, depending on the temperature. The group scrambles to eat as much as possible before it goes bad, but there's only so much you can consume. The rest, it spoils. You watch in horror as food precious, life-sustaining food transforms into a putrid, maggot-infested mess that you can't eat even if you wanted to. Months of successful hunting and preservation wasted because the temperature rose a few degrees. The second problem is water. Lots of water. All that snow and ice that's been accumulating for months is now melting, creating streams and rivers that overflow their banks. The ground, still frozen underneath, can't absorb the water, so it pools and pools and pools. Your cave, which has been relatively dry, starts to flood. Not dramatically, just a slow seepage of water coming in through the entrance, spreading across the floor, soaking into the sleeping hides. Everything is damp. Everything is cold and wet in a different way than before. A clammy, miserable wetness that seeps into your bones. Damp hides don't insulate well. Damp conditions breed sickness, respiratory infections, coughs that never seem to go away. The old woman who's been declining for months catches something. Pneumonia, maybe, though nobody has a word for it. She's dead within a week. The third problem is mud, everywhere. The landscape is no longer frozen and passable. Now it's a swamp of ankle-deep, sometimes knee-deep mud that sucks at your feet with every step. Walking anywhere requires 3 times the effort it used to. Hunting becomes nearly impossible because you can't move quietly through mud, and any animal you do manage to kill has to be dragged back through the muck. Your clothing, already disgusting, becomes coated in mud. Your hands are perpetually muddy. Your face is muddy. The cave floor is muddy. There's no escape from it. The fourth problem, and this one is subtle, but potentially devastating, is disease. All that ice that's been frozen for thousands of years is melting, and frozen in that ice are bacteria and viruses from ages past. Most of them are probably harmless. Some of them might not be. Modern research suggests that ancient pathogens trapped in ice could potentially cause problems when released into ecosystems that have no immunity to them. During the Ice Age, you don't understand any of this, but you notice that strange illnesses seem to sweep through the group when the ice melts. Fevers, rashes, respiratory problems, digestive issues. People die, and you have no idea why. The group is smaller now than it was at the beginning of winter. Thak died from his infected hand. The old woman died from pneumonia. One of the children died from an illness nobody could identify. The baby, the newborn from months ago, died in its sleep one night. Cause unknown. That's just how it goes. Not everyone makes it through winter. Not everyone makes it through the thaw. The survivors are exhausted, physically depleted from months of inadequate nutrition and constant stress, emotionally numb from watching people die, mentally worn down by the relentless monotony of survival. And now you have to face the next challenge, summer in the Ice Age, which, spoiler alert, isn't much better than winter. It's just a different flavor of miserable. The temperature rises to a balmy 50 degrees Fahrenheit on good days, maybe 60 if you're really lucky. This is summer. This is the warm season. You're still cold most of the time, just slightly less cold than before. The insects come out, clouds of biting, stinging insects that are attracted to your unwashed body and have no predators to keep their population in check. The plants start growing, which should be good news because it means more potential food. But most of the plants are tough, fibrous grasses that are barely edible and provide minimal nutrition. You eat them anyway because food is food, but your digestive system protests the whole time. You realize that the cycle is just going to repeat. Summer will turn back into fall, fall into winter. The blizzards will return. The cold will return. The hunger will return. And you'll be right back where you started, huddled in a cave with a dwindling group of people, trying desperately to survive until the next thaw. This is the Ice Age. This is life, an endless cycle of barely surviving one season only to face the next one. No progress, no improvement, just existence, grinding forward day by day, year by year, until you finally die. And here's the really depressing part. This goes on for thousands of years. The Ice Age lasts for millennia, hundreds of generations of humans living exactly like this, facing exactly these problems, dying from exactly these causes. You think about that as you stand in the cave entrance, looking out at the muddy, melting landscape. Thousands of years of this. Your children will experience this. Their children will experience this. And their children's children. Welcome to the thaw. It's not better. It's just different. Summer arrives, if you can call it that. The temperature climbs to a scorching 55 degrees Fahrenheit on a really warm day. You're still wearing most of your hides because 55 degrees is not warm when you're malnourished and have no body fat for insulation. But at least you're not actively freezing to death, which counts as a win in the Ice Age. The group makes a decision. Time to move. The cave you've been living in all winter is a disaster. It smells like death and waste. The floor is a muddy mess. The smoke staining on the walls has made the air quality worse than ever. And most importantly, the hunting grounds nearby have been depleted. You need to follow the animals to their summer grazing areas. So you pack up, which is hilarious because you don't really have possessions. You have tools, stone scrapers, awls, needles, spear points. You have hides for clothing and sleeping. You have some dried plant matter that might be edible. That's it. That's everything you own in the world. The move is exhausting. You're traveling maybe 10 miles, which doesn't sound like much until you factor in that you're carrying everything you own, walking through mud and rough terrain, keeping an eye out for predators, and doing all this while malnourished and weak from winter. The children slow you down. The nursing mother slows you down. Everyone is irritable and tired. You travel in single file, following the group leader who supposedly knows where you're going based on stories passed down from previous generations. Supposedly, there's a good summer camp location, a rock overhang near a river where fish can be caught and game is plentiful. Supposedly, you've never been there. You're taking it on faith that it exists and that another group hasn't already claimed it. The journey takes 3 days. 3 days of walking from dawn until near dusk, stopping only to rest and chew on whatever plant matter you can find along the way. Your feet hurt. Your back hurts. Everything hurts. The hide straps you're using to carry your tools are digging into your shoulders, creating raw spots that will probably get infected. But you arrive. The summer camp is real. It's a rock overhang, not quite a cave, more like a shallow shelter that provides some protection from rain, but none from wind. There's a river nearby, running high with snowmelt, muddy and cold, but full of fish. The surrounding area has vegetation-tough grasses, a few scraggly bushes, nothing that looks particularly edible, but at least it's plant life. The first task is establishing the camp. This means clearing an area under the overhang, arranging sleeping spaces, setting up a fire pit, and basically recreating your cave setup in a new location. It takes hours. Everyone is assigned tasks. The children gather firewood. The women start working on preparing a space for food processing. The men scout the area for game trails and water sources. And then the insects arrive. Oh God, the insects. Winter had its problems, but at least there weren't swarms of biting, buzzing insects that descend on you the moment you stop moving. Mosquitoes, mostly. Clouds of them. They're attracted to your body heat, your breath, your sweat. They land on every exposed bit of skin and bite, and bite, and bite. You can't escape them. You can wave your hands around and temporarily disperse the cloud, but they just come back thicker than before. You can cover your face with a hide, but then you can't see, and you can't breathe properly. You can stand in the smoke of the fire, which keeps the mosquitoes at bay, but then you're breathing toxic smoke, and your eyes are streaming. The bites itch intensely. You scratch until you bleed, creating open wounds that the mosquitoes are even more attracted to. The wounds get infected. You develop rashes and sores. Everyone does. The children are covered in bites, crying and scratching constantly. The nursing mother is having a particularly bad time because the baby is also being bitten, and there's nothing she can do to protect it. This is your summer vacation, trading hypothermia for mosquitoes, trading blizzards for mud and bugs. Congratulations. The fishing is decent, at least. Someone has fashioned a crude spear with a sharpened point, and they stand in the shallows, waiting for fish to swim by, then stabbing down quickly. It takes hours to catch enough fish for the group, and the success rate is maybe 1 in 10 attempts. But it's food. The fish are small and bony, and they taste like mud, but they're protein. You also discover that there are edible plants in the area. Not many, and not particularly nutritious, but they're there, if you know where to look. Roots that have to be dug up with a stick and then washed in the river. Young plant shoots that are tough and bitter but edible if you chew them long enough. Berries tiny, tart berries that grow on bushes with thorns that tear up your hands when you harvest them. The diet improves slightly. Not dramatically, you're still hungry most of the time, but at least there's variety. Fish and plant matter instead of just mammoth meat. Your digestive system, accustomed to a meat-heavy diet, protests the change with cramps and diarrhea. But you adjust. Days pass, weeks. The routine is different from winter, but no less monotonous. Wake up, Check for predators. Eat if there's food. Spend the day fishing, gathering, processing hides, making tools. Deal with insects. Eat again if there's food. Sleep. Repeat. The weather is unpredictable. Some days it rains. Cold, miserable rain that soaks through your hides and makes the fire impossible to light. You huddle under the rock overhang, wet and cold, waiting for it to stop. Other days are hot by Ice Age standards, maybe 65 degrees, and the sun beats down relentlessly. There's no shade except under the overhang, and that space is limited. You start to wonder if maybe winter in the cave was better. At least the cave had walls. At least you weren't being eaten alive by insects. But then you remember the smoke, the cold, the starvation, the blizzards, and you realize that no, winter was definitely worse. Summer is just worse in different ways. This is the Ice Age migration pattern. Follow the food. Move to higher elevations in summer, where game and fish are available. Move back to lower elevation caves in winter, where there's shelter from storms. It's been working for generations, so you keep doing it. But it never gets easier. Every move is exhausting. Every new camp has its own challenges. Every season brings new threats and discomforts. There's no rest, no break, just constant, relentless survival. Welcome to Ice Age Summer Camp. The activities include getting bitten by insects, eating questionable fish, and wishing you were somewhere else, anywhere else. One evening, as the group sits around the fire at the summer camp, picking insects off each other and watching the sun set, you notice something. You're one of the oldest people in the group. This is both surprising and horrifying. You're maybe 35 years old. 35. In the modern world, that's young. You'd be in your prime, with decades of life ahead of you. In the Ice Age, you're ancient. The group leader is maybe 40. He's the oldest person here, and he's starting to show it. His hair is gray. His teeth are mostly gone. He has arthritis in his hands and knees. You can see him wince when he moves, trying to hide the pain, but not quite succeeding. His back is permanently hunched from decades of physical labor. The fact that he's made it to 40 is remarkable. Most people don't. Research from skeletal remains suggests that during the Paleolithic, most people died young, in their 20s or early 30s. Getting to 40 was rare. Getting to 50 was extraordinary. Getting to 60 or 70, that happened. But it was so uncommon that those individuals became legendary. You think about the people who've died since you joined this group. Thak, dead at 23 from an infected hand. The old woman, dead at maybe 50 from pneumonia. The baby, dead at 3 months from causes unknown. The child who died from illness during the blizzard, maybe 7 years old. That's life in the Ice Age. Most people die young, and those who don't die young die middle-aged. But here's the interesting thing. The few people who do survive to old age become incredibly valuable. They're living repositories of knowledge. They remember things that happened decades ago. Successful hunting strategies, dangerous weather patterns, locations of good water sources, which plants are edible and which are poisonous. The group leader, despite his physical decline, is treated with respect because of what he knows. He's survived 40 winters. 40. He's seen things, experienced things, learned things that the younger members haven't. When there's a decision to be made about where to hunt or when to move camp or how to handle a conflict, people listen to him. This wasn't always the case in human evolution. Earlier hominid groups seem to have had very few older adults. The ratio of old to young was heavily skewed toward young. But something changed in the upper Paleolithic, the period you're living in now. Suddenly, more people are surviving to old age, and those older adults are playing crucial roles in group survival. Some researchers call this the grandmother hypothesis, the idea that having older adults around, especially older women who can help care for children and pass on knowledge, provides a survival advantage to the group, and the evidence supports this. Groups with older, experienced members seem to do better than groups composed entirely of young adults. But that doesn't make aging any less miserable. The group leader's arthritis means he can't hunt anymore. He can barely walk some days. His missing teeth mean he can only eat soft foods. No tough mammoth meat for him, just marrow and fish and plant matter that's been chewed by someone else first. Gross, but necessary. He's losing his vision. Not completely blind, but things are blurry, indistinct. He can't see details at a distance anymore. This would be a death sentence if he were alone, but the group compensates. Others do the tasks that require good vision. He provides the knowledge and experience. You wonder how much longer he'll last. A year? 2? At some point, his body will give out completely, and when that happens, the group will lose a massive amount of accumulated knowledge. Unless he's successfully passed it on. Unless he spent enough time teaching the younger members, telling stories, demonstrating techniques. You realize that's what he's been doing these past months. Teaching, constantly teaching, telling stories about past hunts, explaining strategies, describing landmarks and trails. He's trying to download 40 years of experience into the next generation before he dies. And you're part of that next generation. You're 35. If you're lucky, incredibly lucky, you might make it to 40, maybe 45. That means you have maybe 10 years to learn everything the leader knows, and then you'll need to pass it on to the people younger than you. It's a fragile system. Knowledge transmission depends entirely on people living long enough to teach and young people living long enough to learn. There's no writing, no books, no way to preserve information except in human memory. When an elder dies, everything they knew dies with them unless it's been shared. You look around the fire at the other group members. The youngest hunter is 19, strong, fast, good at hunting, but clueless about so many things. He doesn't know which areas flood in spring. He doesn't know the signs of an approaching blizzard. He doesn't know the stories and strategies that have kept this group alive for generations. If everyone over 30 died tomorrow, the group would probably survive, but they'd be starting from scratch in terms of knowledge. They'd make mistakes. They'd suffer consequences. They'd slowly, painfully relearn lessons that had already been learned by previous generations. That's the value of age in the Ice Age. That's why the old man is kept around, despite being a drain on resources. He's not just a person. He's a library, a database, a survival manual in human form. And someday, if you're extraordinarily lucky and don't die from infection or injury or starvation or predators or weather or any of the thousand other things that can kill you, you'll be that person. You'll be the one with gray hair and missing teeth and arthritis, sitting by the fire, telling stories to young people who think 35 is ancient. Assuming you make it that long, the odds aren't great. 2 weeks into your stay at the summer camp, something happens that makes everyone nervous. You see smoke in the distance. Smoke means fire. Fire means people. People means another group. And another group means potential conflict. The group leader calls everyone together for a discussion. What should you do? The options are limited. You could pack up and leave, find a different camp location. But you just got here. You're established. And the fishing has been good. Moving means days of exhausting travel, and no guarantee you'll find somewhere better. You could stay and hope the other group doesn't come looking for you, but that's risky. If they're hunting in the area, they'll probably find you eventually, and an unexpected encounter could turn violent very quickly. Or you could make contact, approach them deliberately, on your terms, and try to establish that you're not a threat. This is also risky. They might interpret your approach as aggression, but at least you'd have some control over how the encounter happens. The group decides to make contact. The leader selects 3 people to go. Himself, Grog, because he's a good fighter if things go wrong, and you, because apparently you're now one of the senior members, and these decisions require experience. You prepare for the encounter carefully. You bring weapon spears, primarily, but carry them in a way that's visible, but non-threatening. You bring some of the fish you've caught as a potential gift or trade item, and you try to project an air of confidence and strength, while also being clearly open to peaceful interaction. The walk to the other camp takes about an hour. The whole time, you're hyper-aware of your surroundings, scanning for signs of ambush or danger. Your heart is pounding. Your palms are sweating despite the cold. This could go very wrong very fast. You reach the edge of their camp. They've seen you coming, probably spotted you 10 minutes ago. There are 5 of them visible, all men, all armed. They're standing in a defensive formation, spears ready, watching you approach. The group leader raises his hand in what you hope is a universal gesture of peace. He speaks not that you expect them to understand the words, but tone matters. He's using a calm, non-threatening voice. He gestures to the fish you're carrying. He points back toward your camp, indicating that you have an established location and aren't trying to take theirs. There's a long, tense moment where nobody moves. You can see them assessing you, trying to determine if you're a threat. Are you scouts for a larger group? Are you trying to lure them into an ambush? Are you so desperate that you're willing to attack despite being outnumbered? Then, one of their men steps forward. He's older, maybe the same age as your leader. He doesn't lower his spear, but his posture relaxes slightly. He speaks, and even though you don't understand the words, the tone suggests he's asking questions. Where are you from? How many in your group? What do you want? The communication is halting, awkward, relies more on gestures and tone than actual language. But gradually, over the course of maybe 30 minutes, both groups come to an understanding. You're not here to fight. Neither are they. There's enough fish and game in the area for both groups if you stay on opposite sides of the river. You offer the fish as a gesture of goodwill. They accept it And in return, they offer some plant matter they've gathered roots that they've already cleaned and processed. It's a trade, a symbolic one, establishing that you're willing to exchange resources rather than fight over them. The encounter ends. You walk back to your camp, tension slowly draining from your body. That could have gone so differently. You could have been attacked. People could have died. The fact that it resolved peacefully is almost miraculous. But the presence of another group changes everything. You're no longer alone in this area. You have neighbors, and neighbors mean you need to be careful about where you hunt, where you fish, where you gather. You need to establish boundaries, maintain them, and hope that both groups respect them. Over the following weeks, you occasionally see members of the other group at a distance. There are a few more exchanges: fish for plant matter, a stone tool for a prepared hide. Slowly, cautiously, a relationship develops. Not friendship, exactly, more like mutual tolerance. But there's always tension, always the awareness that resources are scarce and competition is fierce. If your group has a bad hunting season and starts to starve, would you raid the other camp for food? Probably. Would they do the same to you? Definitely. This is the reality of human interaction in the Ice Age. Groups need each other for trade, for genetic diversity, for shared knowledge. But groups also compete with each other for resources, territory, and survival. Every encounter is a calculation. Is cooperation more beneficial than conflict? And the answer changes depending on circumstances. For now, cooperation is working. Both groups are getting by. But winter is coming, and winter changes everything. When food becomes scarce and survival is uncertain, peaceful coexistence becomes much harder to maintain. You think about that as you watch smoke rise from their camp in the distance. Neighbors today, enemies tomorrow, maybe, probably. Welcome to Ice Age geopolitics. It's complicated, tense, and potentially deadly. Summer is ending. You can feel it in the air. The temperature is dropping. The days are getting shorter. The animals are starting to migrate back to their winter ranges, which means your group needs to migrate too, back to the cave you left months ago. The prospect fills you with a dread that's become familiar. You know what's waiting for you. Months of cold, darkness, hunger, and smoke-filled air. Months of being trapped in a small space with people you're already sick of. Months of uncertainty about whether you'll survive until spring. But you don't have a choice. Staying at the summer camp isn't an option. The rock overhang provides no protection from blizzards. The river will freeze, making fishing impossible. The game will leave the area, following their own migration patterns. Staying means dying. So you pack up, again. The group dismantles the summer camp, gathers tools and hides, and prepares for the journey back. It's the same exhausting process as before, but now you're doing it with the knowledge of what you're returning to. The journey takes 4 days this time, because you're carrying more supplies and moving more slowly as a group. Everyone is tired. Everyone is dreading winter. Nobody talks much. You just walk, one foot in front of the other, trying not to think about the months ahead. You arrive at the cave to find it exactly as you left it. Filthy, smoke-stained, depressing, The floor is still muddy from spring thaw. The smell is still awful. Nothing has improved in your absence, but it's shelter, and shelter is about to become essential. The first snowfall comes 2 days after your return. Just a light dusting at first, but everyone knows what it means. Winter is here. The cycle is beginning again. You watch the snow fall outside the cave entrance and feel a crushing sense of déjà vu. You've done this before. Last year. The year before that. You'll do it again next year. If you survive. This is life. This is all life will ever be. An endless loop of summer camps and winter caves, hunting and gathering, cold and hunger, birth and death. The group settles into winter routines, building up the firewood supply, hunting as much game as possible before the weather turns truly terrible, processing hides for clothing and bedding. It's all familiar now, depressingly familiar. One night, sitting by the fire, someone asks the group leader, "How many winters have you survived?" He thinks for a moment, counting on his fingers, then says, 40. 40 winters. 40 cycles of this same miserable routine. The number is staggering. You wonder if he ever gets tired of it. The endless repetition, the constant struggle, the knowledge that next winter will be exactly like this one. But you don't ask, because you know the answer. Of course he gets tired of it. Everyone does. But being tired of survival doesn't change the fact that it's still necessary. The first major blizzard hits a week later. You're trapped in the cave for 5 days this time. 5 days of cold, smoke, hunger, and tension. By the end of it, 2 people have gotten into a fist fight over something trivial. The baby is crying nonstop, and everyone is on edge. This is winter. This is what you've returned to, and it will continue like this for months. Months of grinding, relentless survival with no break and no hope for improvement. You realize something as you sit there in the smoke-filled cave, hungry and cold and miserable. You've become your parents, and your parents became their parents, and their parents became their parents, going back generation after generation, all of them living this same life, facing these same struggles, surviving these same conditions. And your children, if you have any, will become you. They'll inherit this life, this struggle, this endless cycle. They'll spend their winters in caves and their summers at temporary camps, always moving, always hungry, always one disaster away from death. That's the Ice Age. That's the human experience for thousands of years. Not progress, not improvement, just survival. Repeated endlessly, generation after generation. The fire crackles. Someone coughs. The wind howls outside. And you sit there, wrapped in your filthy hide, breathing smoke, and accept that this is your life. This is everyone's life. Welcome back to the cave. Winter has returned, and next year, you'll do it all over again. Midway through winter, during a particularly bad stretch, when food is scarce and everyone is miserable, something small happens that changes the mood in the cave. One of the children, maybe 8 years old, picks up a piece of charcoal from the fire and starts drawing on the cave wall. Simple lines at first, then shapes, then something recognizable. A mammoth. Crude, childish, but unmistakably a mammoth. People stop what they're doing to watch. The child keeps drawing, adding more mammoths, adding hunters with spears, creating a scene. It's not just decoration, it's a story. The story of the last successful hunt, immortalized in charcoal on stone. Someone else picks up a different piece of charcoal and adds to it, then someone else. Within an hour, there's a whole narrative on the wall hunters pursuing game, spears striking targets, the group celebrating. It's collaborative art. It's communication. It's something that transcends the immediate misery of survival. And here's the remarkable thing. This is a uniquely human behavior. No other species does this. No other animal creates visual narratives, tells stories through images, communicates across time by leaving marks on walls. This cave art, these simple drawings that will last for tens of thousands of years, represents something fundamental about what makes humans different. Research suggests that the cognitive processes required for creating narrative art are the same ones used for language development, the ability to translate experience into symbols, to communicate abstract concepts, to tell stories that persist beyond the storyteller. These are the foundations of human culture. You look at the drawings and realize this is how your group survives. Not just through hunting and tool making and finding shelter, but through this, through the ability to share knowledge, to pass on stories, to create meaning in the midst of hardship. The oral traditions, the stories told around fires, the drawings on cave walls, they're all part of the same thing. They're cultural transmission. They're how each generation learns from the previous one without having to rediscover everything from scratch. And it's not just practical knowledge, it's also myths, legends, explanations for how the world works. Why does the sun rise? Where do people go when they die? What made the first fire? These questions have answers in the stories your group tells, and those answers provide comfort and structure in a world that often seems random and cruel. The ability to cooperate at this level, to share food, to care for each other's children, to hunt in coordinated groups, to pass on knowledge through generations. This is what allowed humans to survive the Ice Age when other species couldn't. Neanderthals were stronger, better adapted to cold, but they apparently lacked this level of cultural sophistication, this ability to build on accumulated knowledge. You think about the neighboring group you met at the summer camp. They're going through the same struggles you are, facing the same challenges, but they're surviving too. And occasionally, when groups meet, they exchange more than just fish and plant matter. They exchange ideas, techniques, stories. That's how innovations spread across Ice Age populations. Someone figures out a better way to make a spear point, and that knowledge travels from group to group through trade and interaction. Someone discovers a new edible plant, and that information gets passed along. Cultural evolution happens slowly, but it happens. And here you are, part of that process, living in a cave during one of the harshest periods in human history, creating art on walls, telling stories, surviving through cooperation and accumulated wisdom. It's miserable, yes. It's brutal and uncomfortable and often terrifying, but it's also remarkable. Human resilience isn't about being the strongest or the fastest or the most physically adapted to the environment. It's about being able to work together, to learn from each other, to create culture and transmit it across generations. That's what's happening in this smoke-filled cave right now. The child who drew the mammoth is being taught by the older members how to improve their technique. Next year, they'll draw better mammoths, and the year after that, even better. And someday, they'll teach their own children to draw. The skills compound. The knowledge grows. Generation by generation, humans get slightly better at survival. Not fast enough to make your life comfortable. Not fast enough to solve the immediate problems of cold and hunger and disease. But fast enough that, over thousands of years, things change. Slowly, imperceptibly, but they change. You look at the drawings on the wall, these simple images created with charcoal and ochre, and you understand this is how humans survive, not through individual strength, but through collective memory, not through physical adaptation, but through cultural innovation. This is the human touch. This is what sets your species apart, and it's what will carry you through the Ice Age, through winter after brutal winter, until eventually, thousands of years from now, the climate shifts and life becomes slightly less impossible. But that's a story for a future you'll never see. For now, there's just the cave, the fire, the smoke, the cold, and these drawings on the wall that tell the story of who you are and how you survive. Years pass. The group leader, who was 40 when you first met him, is now visibly declining. His arthritis has progressed to the point where he can barely walk. His vision is nearly gone. He spends most of his time sitting by the fire, wrapped in hides, occasionally offering advice, but no longer able to contribute physically to the group's survival. Everyone knows what's coming. He knows what's coming. There's no medical intervention that can save him, no treatment for old age and accumulated damage. He's reached the end of his span, and in the Ice Age, the end comes quickly once decline begins. One morning, he doesn't wake up, just dies in his sleep, quietly, during the night. It's the best death anyone can hope for. In the Ice Age, peaceful, painless, surrounded by the group that's been his family for 40 plus years. There's sadness, certainly. He was a good leader, a repository of knowledge, a link to the past. But there's also a practical acknowledgement that this was inevitable. Everyone dies. Most people die young. The fact that he made it to his 40s is extraordinary. The group wraps his body and carries it outside to bury it under rocks. They place some of his tools with him, his favorite scraper, a spear point he was particularly proud of. These objects won't help him in any afterlife, but they're symbols, ways of acknowledging that he was a person, that his life mattered, that he'll be remembered. And he will be remembered for a while. His stories will continue to be told around fires. His techniques for napping stone and tracking game will persist in the practices he taught others. But eventually, over generations, his individual identity will fade. He'll become just another ancestor, a name mentioned in passing, then not mentioned at all. That's the nature of oral tradition. Memory persists, but it transforms. The specifics blur. The person becomes legend, legend becomes myth, myth becomes just the old ways. Without writing, there's no way to preserve the details. The past is constantly being rewritten by the present. A new leader emerges, one of the hunters in his 30s, someone who's proven himself capable and who has the respect of the group. The transition is smooth because succession has been understood for years. Everyone knew who would take over when the old leader could no longer lead. Life continues. The new leader is competent, but he lacks the decades of experience the old one had. He'll make mistakes. The group will suffer some consequences, but they'll survive, and he'll learn, and eventually he'll accumulate his own store of wisdom to pass on. You're getting older too, 38 now, which makes you one of the elders of the group. Your body is starting to show the wear joints that ache in cold weather, a persistent cough that never quite goes away, teeth that are loose or missing. You can still contribute, still hunt and work, but you're noticeably slower than you used to be. You wonder how many more winters you have. 5? 10? Probably not 20. Your body is breaking down the way all bodies do in the Ice Age gradually, through accumulated damage and inadequate nutrition and constant stress. There's no reversing it, no treatment, just slow decline until one day you don't wake up, just like the old leader. The thought is simultaneously terrifying and comforting. Terrifying because death is scary and you're not ready. Comforting because at least it means this struggle will eventually end. No more cold, no more hunger, no more endless cycles of survival. But that's future you's problem. Present you still has work to do, tools to make, knowledge to pass on, stories to tell the younger generation. You've become what the old leader was, a living library, a connection to the past, a source of wisdom for those who haven't experienced what you have. One of the younger hunters comes to you with questions about tracking animals in snow. You explain what you've learned over decades, how to read tracks, how to estimate how long ago an animal passed through, how to predict where it's heading. The hunter listens, absorbs, asks follow-up questions. This is cultural transmission, happening in real time. Another day, one of the children asks you about the drawings on the cave wall. Some of them are very old, decades old maybe, and the stories behind them have been partially forgotten. You tell what you know. You explain who drew them, what they represent, why they matter. The child listens with fascination, then asks if you'll help them make new drawings. This is your legacy, not monuments or written records or any kind of lasting fame, just knowledge passed on, stories preserved for one more generation, children taught to survive in a brutal world. It's small, but it's everything. The cycle continues. Winter follows. Summer follows winter. People are born, grow up, have children of their own, grow old, die. The group fluctuates in size, sometimes larger, sometimes smaller, but persists across generations. The caves are occupied, abandoned, reoccupied by different groups in different eras. And slowly, imperceptibly, the world changes. The techniques improve, the tools get better, the accumulated knowledge grows. Not in your lifetime, not in any way you'll ever be aware of, but across centuries, across millennia, the human experience shifts from barely surviving to actually thriving. You won't see it. You'll die in this cave, or one like it, having lived a life of struggle and hardship that would be unimaginable to future generations. But you're part of the chain that leads to those future generations. You're a link between the past and the future, carrying knowledge forward, ensuring the species survives. That's the slow fade. That's how change happens in the Ice Age. One generation at a time. One story at a time. One person dying and another taking their place. Each one adding a tiny bit to the collective knowledge that keeps humanity alive. It's not dramatic, it's not heroic, but it's real, and it works. Late one night, huddled by a dying fire, you ask yourself the question that probably every human in the Ice Age has asked at some point. Why are we doing this? What's the point of all this suffering? All this struggle? You wake up cold, spend the day working to barely survive, go to sleep hungry, and then do it again the next day, and the next, and the next, for your entire life. Why? You could just stop, walk out into a blizzard, and let the cold take you. It would be over quickly. No more hunger, no more pain, no more endless, grinding survival. It would be so easy. But you don't. None of you do. Or, well, some people do. You've heard stories of individuals who walked into the cold and didn't come back. But most people don't. Most people keep going, keep surviving, keep struggling against impossible odds. Why? There's no good answer. Or rather, there are lots of answers, and they're all partially right, but none of them are completely satisfying. Maybe it's biological, some deep instinct for survival that's built into the human brain that keeps you fighting even when logic says there's no point. The same instinct that makes you pull your hand away from fire, that makes you gasp for air when you're drowning. Survive, survive, survive. The body doesn't care about meaning or purpose. It just wants to continue existing. Maybe it's social. You keep going because the group needs you, because your knowledge and labor contribute to everyone's survival, because abandoning the group would be abandoning your children, your friends, the people who've shared this struggle with you. There's meaning in connection, in being part of something larger than yourself. Maybe it's hope. Not hope that things will get dramatically better in your lifetime, that's unrealistic, but hope that tomorrow might be slightly less terrible than today. Hope that the next hunt will be successful. Hope that your children will survive and have children of their own. Hope, even if it's irrational, even if it's not supported by evidence, even if it's just a story you tell yourself to get through the next hour. Or maybe it's spite. Maybe you keep going just to prove that you can, to demonstrate that humans are resilient enough to survive even in conditions that should be impossible. The Ice Age threw everything at you: cold, hunger, predators, disease, accidents, social conflict, and you're still here. That's worth something, isn't it? You look around the cave at the other sleeping forms. The new leader, snoring softly. The woman who's good with hides, curled up with her children. Grog, somehow still alive and still annoying after all these years. The teenagers, who'll become the next generation of hunters. The elderly, who cling to life, one more day, one more week. They're all making the same choice you are. Every morning, waking up and deciding to keep going. Not because they've worked out some profound philosophical justification, just because that's what humans do. We survive, we persist, we endure, and maybe that's enough. Maybe there doesn't need to be a grand purpose or cosmic meaning. Maybe survival itself is the point. The simple act of existing, of continuing, of passing something on to the next generation. Maybe that's all the meaning there needs to be. The fire crackles. Someone coughs in their sleep. Outside, the wind howls, carrying snow that will still be falling when you wake up in a few hours. And you'll wake up. You'll face another day. Because that's what you do. That's what humans have always done. Through the Ice Age, through every hardship and crisis and catastrophic event, they survived. Not because they were the strongest or the fastest or the best adapted, but because they refused to give up, because they worked together, because they learned from the past and planned for the future, because they told stories and made art and found meaning in the struggle itself. You're part of that lineage. This cave, this moment, this life of brutal simplicity, it's all part of the long story of human survival. The story that started in Africa hundreds of thousands of years ago and will continue long after you're gone. The story that will eventually lead to cities and agriculture and technology and comfort, but also to new problems and new struggles and new questions about meaning and purpose. For now, though, there's just this: the cave, the cold, the group, and the choice to keep going for one more day. You pull your hide tighter, breathe in the smoky air, and close your eyes. Tomorrow, you'll wake up cold and hungry. Tomorrow, you'll struggle to survive. Tomorrow, you'll ask yourself the same questions. But tomorrow hasn't happened yet. Right now, you're here. You're alive. You're human. And somehow, improbably, that's enough. So there you have it, exhausted listener, your guided tour through Ice Age survival, your intimate look at what life was like when every day was a struggle and comfort, was a concept that hadn't been invented yet. I hope you're comfortable right now in your climate-controlled room, lying on your soft mattress with your clean sheets, your body free of parasites, your stomach full of food that was prepared in a kitchen that didn't try to asphyxiate you with smoke. I hope you're appreciating the miracle of modern existence, the fact that you can control your environment, that you have access to medicine and dentistry, that you'll probably live past 40 without it being considered extraordinary. Because here's the thing: every comfort you take for granted, every convenience you barely notice, exists because thousands of generations of humans survived the Ice Age. They huddled in caves and faced down mammoths and endured blizzards and watched their children die and kept going anyway. They passed on their knowledge. They told their stories. They made their art on cave walls. They survived so that eventually, after countless more struggles and hardships, you could exist. So maybe cut yourself some slack about your modern problems. Yes, life is still hard. Yes, you face challenges and stress and uncertainty, but at least you're not actively freezing to death while being eaten by insects and wondering if that infected cut is going to kill you. That's progress. That's the gift your Ice Age ancestors gave you. And now, hopefully, you're ready to sleep. You've spent the last several hours living vicariously through the worst period in human history. Your brain is full of images of cold, smoke, hunger, and suffering. Your subconscious is processing just how good you actually have it. Sweet dreams, tired listener. Dream of central heating and grocery stores, and antibiotics. Dream of a world where survival isn't a full-time job and you can actually relax sometimes. Dream of all the generations between you and those ice age caves, each one making life slightly more bearable for the next. And when you wake up tomorrow, comfortable and warm and alive in the 21st century, maybe take a moment to be grateful that you weren't born 20,000 years ago. Because trust me, you dodged a bullet. Actually, you dodged an entire ice age. Good night, exhausted listener. And until next time,